You're listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. Thank you for your time.
Yay!
Exactly. And here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. If that didn't blow out your eardrums or your car speakers or wherever you're listening to this on, hold on, let me turn it up and it will. Just kidding, I'm turning it down. For all of you sensitive listeners, thank you again for tuning back to the Anna Vivo podcast. We are joined today by the one and only, literally the only, Joanne Crompton.
Hello. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm so excited today to have you on the air.
Yeah, thank you.
We are gathered, for the listeners just tuning in, gathered here in my little home office by our fireplace that is not on because it would get too toasty in here. And as a reminder to all of you listening in, this is not a professional podcast. So you may hear and you may also hear children running up and down the hall, and you may hear our dog or whatever else is going on in the background. So just take that with a grain of salt, and thank you for your grace. And now I am pleased to introduce you to Joanne Crompton, who is just this amazing sort of all-around woman who, can I use the word exotic? Because that's an okay word to do.
Sure. I definitely am an odd duck. I understand.
Odd would be a different word. I was going to say exotic, but odd, sure, we'll go with that. Where were you born?
I was born in Ghana, West Africa.
Look at that. And
Yep.
are you Ghanese?
Ghanaian. No.
Ghanaian, sorry.
No
For our
worries.
listeners here.
I actually looked into it when I turned 18 to see if I could get dual citizenship.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But Ghana didn't allow it at the time. So
Interesting.
yeah, so I'm just plain old American.
Okay.
But I do have a Ghanaian name. It's called Ekua.
Oh.
Ekua. It's because the tribe that I was closest to where I was born, they would name you based on the day of the week that you were born. So I'm Wednesday born. Ekua.
So that literally means Wednesday?
Yes.
Akua? Mm-hmm. It sounds way
That's
prettier.
That's why, doesn't it?
Just
Yeah.
Wednesday.
That's why you hear a lot of like Kofis and stuff, because that's actually, I think it's like Thursday or Friday born.
Is that a common day to be born on?
I guess so.
Where were you 9 months ago?
Exactly.
What day was it? Okay.
It's
Wow.
a good system, really. It's very straightforward.
Well, it seems like it would be the first 7 people that were born, but after that, now you're Kofi the second. Yes. Do they have a way to differentiate in months as well? Is it your middle name?
No.
Oh, okay.
They have a way to differentiate between the older and younger borns, though.
That's
so
cool.
like my sister was also born on a Wednesday.
Oh no.
I know, she ruined everything. So then it was Ekua Kakraba and Ekua Penin, the older and the younger.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Wow. Do they shorten that? Is that like a junior and senior kind of thing in the U.S.? Like
No.
Cool. Well, that's kind of exciting. A little bit of trivia
There you go.
for you. So you were
Have another
born
name.
in Ghana, Ghanaian, and why were you born there? What were your parents doing at the time?
They were missionaries with the Navigators as well. Their heart was to help disciple the locals there, and they worked initially in Cape Coast, which was they had a university there, so they were working with university students, it's about 2 hours to the east of the capital city in Accra. So I was born there and grew up in that area until I was we came back for my first grade year to the States, and then after that we moved to the capital. So I was there for about 5 years.
Very important year for you to have U.S. education is your first grade.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
will not have a South African first grader. We're going to do it in the U.S. Okay, interesting.
No, it was just their rotation of the furloughs
Sure.
because they needed to come back for a break too. So they went in the 80s, and it was very tough. They had a famine, they had a coup going on in Ghana. So the fact that my parents like stuck it out as long as they did.
Yeah, and how many siblings do you have?
I have 2 older brothers and a younger sister.
And so you were all born?
The oldest one was born in Tacoma.
Okay.
And then about 9 months after he was born, then my parents left to
And then
Africa.
they had the other 3 of you in the middle of this famine and coup.
Yeah, like bring it on. Like,
Yeah.
why not?
Hey, when you're trusting the Lord with fullness of His riches and kingdom, I mean, there's no limits, right?
Amen.
So
yeah, I'm so impressed at what my parents did because they just faced the challenges head on, and God met them in every single situation.
So were they Navigator missionaries had they been doing this already for a long time, or was this like, hey, we decided to join the Navigators, and wow, our first stop is God?
My dad had been part of the Navigators, but he had been part of it with the military, first
Okay.
in Okinawa, Japan, after he got out of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And then he actually was over in the Joint Base Lewis McChord
Okay.
with the military for years. And that's where he met my mom when he was out in this area,
Cool.
because she was a substitute teacher in the Seattle area.
Cool.
So, yeah.
So he was very military focused, as traditionally the Navigators have been, starting in the Navy and working with the military primarily and firstmost. And now, of course, we know they've spread to cities and college campuses and all sorts of different avenues that the Navigator ministry has sort of poured into. But one of them is apparently this overseas. So why did they go? What branch of the Navigators, or what was that? Or was he just like, we're out? And by the way, I'm a Navigator.
Yeah. No, my dad always had, he always wanted to see what else was going on, like besides just the Navigator ministry. So he took like a whole month to go travel around with this other ministry, and that was over in Africa. And so as he was learning more about Africa, he went to like Kenya and South Africa, all different places.
With
for a whole
this
month
other ministry.
With this other
Yeah.
ministry. He was just learning what they did, and God really worked on his heart to just have a passion for those over in Africa. And so
Cool.
when he came back, this opportunity came up with the Navigators. They asked him if he would consider going to Ghana, and he was, so they had just gotten married, my mom and my dad, and they both went and just took some time together or away or like separately, and were praying to God, what should we do? Is this where we should go? And it was Abraham in Genesis 12,
Okay.
where it says, go leave your homeland and go to a nation that I'm showing you. And God spoke to them both separately with that exact same passage to go to Ghana. And so that's what they did. They yep, packed everything up. And when I say packed everything up, I mean like they had to take stuff for like two years of stuff because
Yeah.
they knew there was a famine. So
Sure, and this is the 80s. I mean,
Yeah. Figure
you're
out,
not
you know-
Amazoning. Amazoning? Is
Yeah,
that, is that an
Amazon.
adjective now? Can we use that? you're not Googling things and getting
Right?
it sent to
Nope.
you. So
Nope.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was very much a leap of faith, and trying to figure out how how much toothpaste do you think you'll need for 2 years? You figure that out.
Right. Yeah. Where do we get the toothpaste when we run out? And and I'm sure you're in South Africa. They went immediately. Well,
was in West
They went
Africa,
to Ghana, initially, and they were there that whole time, right? Okay. So, what was the Navigators doing out there? Was his mission a traditional Navigator ministry of discipling other men of a local church there, or were they establishing schools, or were they working in?
They were working with the
college
collegiate
campus?
ministry,
Okay.
or the initially, and it was slightly different in the fact that, like, my dad was also trying to figure out ways to help them just earn a living, really.
Sure,
So like
yeah.
he helped them come up with ideas of, hey, maybe if you guys raise chickens,
Yeah.
you could have more income and stuff, because they had nothing. Right?
Yeah.
So it was not just the mentality of how do we help them spiritually, but we
Right.
also have to help them physically, because
Which
they are
is
in
probably the most
desperate need.
important initially. Yeah. How many people come in with a spiritual mission and forget all about the
Yeah.
physical mission?
Well, and the idea of not just handing out money too, but trying
Sure.
to show them
Yeah.
ways that they can actually earn a living for themselves too.
Now, were they sponsored by a church back here in Washington? But when they went, or was it traditional Navigator support? Hey, we're looking to all of our family and friends support us on
Yeah,
this.
it was the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a good church in the Kent area that my mom had been part of
Okay.
that really supported them. But yeah, a lot of different families, friends, just
Wow.
yeah.
Man, that's cool. And so when did you leave? At what age did you leave Africa?
The summer before I turned 13.
Okay.
So
So you were a full-grown woman at that time.
funny story. So the December before I came back, I went with my dad all the way up to the northern part to the villages, very rural tribal villages. I had never been out to that, like, area before.
Is this like the gods must be crazy type
Yes.
people? Okay. Like
Yes.
Coke bottle falls out of the sky and they think God is answering. Okay.
I mean,
like that kind of rule.
they've seen, yes, but like there was a story of the reason we were out there is because my dad had ministered to this guy who ended up out in this rural area, saw a picture of Jesus and like a picture of Jesus, like actually drawn somewhere on, like hanging on somebody's wall.
Wow.
And they asked him, like, do you know who that is? And they had no idea. And so then they shared the gospel. And so then that whole village came to Christ. And so, yeah. So then,
cool.
so then my dad was like, oh, we should go follow up. And so he invited me to come out, as a 12-year-old to see what his dad was doing. It was so cool. And then my brother also came with. And so we all took the trek all the way up north. And this is, driving the old beat up truck that he had. We're driving up north. And I was, it was exciting, but I was definitely like, I had no idea what to expect. But out there, there was like an older chief who was probably in his 50s. And he asked my dad if he could marry me.
Oh, wow.
So yes, apparently I was of age.
All that to say, yes, a full-grown woman.
And I was not having it.
Did your dad even pause?
He's like,
like a joke.
Yeah.
He's like, interesting. How does the dowry system work in Ghana? Who pays who?
He was trying to be very polite and just, I think he just sort of laughed it off as a joke. But,
wow. Which is sort of also not a joke considering that's probably what they actually do with their own tribal people. Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, you think of Mary. How old is Mary traditionally supposed to be when she was pregnant with Christ, right?
Yeah,
Or
a teenager.
betrothed to Joseph. Yeah, young teenager. So, wow. Okay. It's funny / terrifying story.
My dad protected me.
Of course.
That's
and your brother.
Yes.
Shout out to your brother.
Yes.
So, so that you left Africa at that point and you guys all came back here to Washington? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you were raised in the traditional American way from then on? Or were you all...
Sure.
What did you do? What did he do? What did they do as a family?
So my parents still worked with the Navigators, but they decided to focus their ministry on the Seattle metro area. So that's what my dad's heart was, to just try to connect people around the Seattle area and to help them grow in walking with God.
Okay.
So I admired what they did, but I never really got that involved with what they did.
Sure.
I had my own stuff going on in high school and, trying to figure out where on earth I'm going to go to college. The details of life.
Yeah. Did you have a pretty strong identity of who you were because you had been raised in a way that wasn't just a traditional American Christian culture, but getting to witness what true Christianity was? Would you say that you had a stronger identity in who you were and you weren't kind of struggling with that as a typical young teenage girl? Or did you still experience a lot of those, like, especially a new culture coming back and like, who am I? Yeah,
there was a little of both. From an early age, I felt like God was a close friend as I accepted him as my Lord and Savior. So I always knew he was around, and I remember reading the Bible even in third grade. But yeah, coming back to the States, I had this, crazy idea that the States was very much just a lot of fun and always fun, because all I knew of the States was when I came back for vacations.
Right, yeah.
And so
which is all fun.
Right, it was all fun.
They have air conditioning here?
Yeah. So
the doors open automatically at the supermarket?
It is amazing. They have Oreos here. I'm just going to say.
That's true. Sleeves and sleeves.
Like, what is this land of milk and Oreos?
Yeah. The promises of the Bible are real.
Yes. It's
you and
the
my
little
wife
things.
both.
Yeah. No, I came back and I definitely didn't realize like how much I would miss Ghana and like the friends I'd left there and stuff.
Sure.
And that's one of the things that was hard, is just coming back and realizing, oh, wow, I have to actually start a life here and like make new friends. And what's that like? And, I had watched Saved by the Bell. I don't know if you remember that old school. And so I was like, oh, that's what high school's like, right?
The TV show?
The TV show,
Yes.
Saved by the Bell. And like, that was not what high school was like.
Yeah.
So yeah, but God was merciful. He gave me some good friends that really the hardest thing. You go into the cafeteria and you're like, where do I sit? Like,
Sure.
what do I do?
Yeah.
Because everybody has their own, cliques of people that they've already grown up with. And you're the odd weird one that's coming in.
Exotic.
Exotic, thank
Yeah.
you. The exotic one that's like, I wore like the exact same sweatshirt almost every single day because I was like, I'm just so cold. What is this?
Yeah, culture shock, environment shock, spiritual shock. So you've got a family of 3 other siblings that are also going through the same thing, and a family, the parents that are navigating new career fields or new places. And granted, they're from here-ish, and so there was some familiarity in the Seattle and Washington area. But that outside of each other and that, you guys really, your anchor is the Lord at this point. And so would you say, from a testimony perspective, when you came to know the Lord, was it during a time of deep transition and deep, I don't want to say pain, but deep struggle, and that's where I find the Lord, that's where I'm grasping for him, that's where I come to know who I am, and where I find my assurance of salvation is through his continued faithfulness in these darker times? Or were you kind of already, you're a missionary kid, there's this expectation of like, of course, you already know Jesus, you know all this stuff, and you're from Africa, and you had that experience back in Africa.
I definitely believed in God and knew him at a very early age, but every single one of these times where, it would hit me like, oh my gosh, I don't have any friends, it was, every single one was a time for me to choose, am I going to turn away from God or turn to him? And thankfully I did have, think about it. I did have parents and siblings that were pointing towards God. And so, especially just seeing my parents and how they loved each other and how they loved others around and how they truly walked the walk. It wasn't just about, it was a personal relationship with God. And so I knew that there was something different. And so I, would try to turn towards God, but it was hard, and I remember, thankfully, about a year after I came back, that's when I met my best friend, Karen. Like, she was actually...
Shout out to Karen.
Yeah, shout out to Karen. Her parents had been missionaries with the Navigators over in Vienna, Austria, and that's where she was born.
Yeah.
And so, but then she was in the Seattle area, and it was 4th of July that we met. We all met as the 2 families came together and had a 4th of July dinner.
Some sort of just Navigator gathering, like, hey, you guys were born overseas, we're born overseas, we've got this weird thing
Well,
going
my
on.
parents, I think they were just looking for other Navigators in the area, and they found out that the Alberts were there, and so we went and had 4th of July with them, and that's when I first met her. And she was doing Bible quizzing, which is basically you memorize books of the Bible.
Who does that?
I know. Exotic people.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you would quiz on them. And
this was Karen. Karen was doing this?
Karen was doing this.
What age is this now?
So she was,
you guys
she did
met
it
at the 4th of July and you were...
Yeah, so she was probably 16, 15 or 16. And I was like 14 at the time. Or right before I turned 14. And so I decided to join Bible quizzing as well. And so we became good friends with that. And that really helped me grow too, because you would memorize these books of the Bible. And even though I can't quote them, like to this day, I couldn't, but they're still in me at some point,
right.
And God really used them to work on my heart and even work on my ability to memorize things that I, have used all my life. So that was exciting too, how God orchestrated that so that I would meet my best friend and then also do this little different pastime of Bible quizzing. And they had like regional competitions and national competitions.
Wow.
But yeah, my senior year though, we were really good. We were a really good team and we were expected to win everything. And I also was doing me and this other girl were going to be singing, and we had a singing competition with the same national competition. And we were also supposed to do really well, and God allowed everything to fall apart. And that was one of the moments that I remember really clearly of just having to go to God and be like, God, why are you really good even in all the disappointments and in the pain? Because this is not how things were supposed to go. Like, if they'd bet on it in Las Vegas, they would have bet that we would have won because we were doing so well. And yet God, for one reason or another, I just allowed it all to fall apart. And but thankfully, he used that as for my heart to really, really understand that. Yeah, like it's not about just being all perfect in life, right? Getting
all
exactly
knowledge,
right.
all perfect.
It's about my relationship with God, and that even when things are really hard and disappointing, he is still good, and he can still use that for good, which is with a great learning tool that I needed for the rest of my life, right? I mean, and so I was a senior in high school when I learned that, and had to learn it many, many other times.
But I mean, talk about going back to his continued sustaining faithfulness. If the other side of that track is just a long road of pride too, of like, look at what I did, look at my accomplishments, look at and so in his mercy, it's allowing that struggle. But man, that's speaking of, I mean, this could be so hard. You're not just any year, but your senior year, right? Like this is what everyone's going to remember, right?
Yep. Right.
Wow.
You're supposed to finish strong, and I did not finish strong. That's okay. I finished strong in God, which was important.
That's right. Yeah. What high school was this?
So I went to Bothell High School, but like my senior year, I actually did a lot of college classes through Running Start and stuff. So, but all that disappointment was really through the national competition where we were through the church that we were going to do our Bible quizzing and stuff with. But
that's okay. We beat Bothell our senior year in football, so a little low carber.
Did you really?
Yep. We took state, and that was a good year. Shout out to the entire football team and staff who did all of that hard work.
Impressive, yes.
Yeah, our arch nemesis in the Tacoma Dome. But wow. So was she here? They were in Seattle as well.
Yep.
And she graduated also same place and
no,
same
she
time?
So she did homeschooling actually.
Okay.
So and she was a couple years older than me, so she graduated before I did.
But you guys are friends to this day.
To this day.
Yeah.
She's the kindred spirit I really needed, and like the iron sharpened iron. Just I'm amazed at how God has led us to be friends over all these years, because honestly, we haven't really lived together that much. She graduated from the University of Washington a couple years before I did and moved out to the East Coast. And so it was really, we would just have to go and travel together to see each other.
Just like in Africa, all the highlights are the times you come back for the fun.
Exactly.
But you keep each other sharp in a day and age, amazingly, where the Lord's blessed us to be able to do that with all the technology we have and stuff. So that's so cool. That really highlights the importance of going together and being, alongside someone and in this life and the difficulty and, holding each other accountable and really kind of living out a Navigator. I mean, living out Christ's calling to us to go into the world and disciple and make disciples. But then to not just abandon them, to come alongside and live life on life and continue to sharpen one another and hold each other accountable, even from the very first meeting of, hey, I'm memorizing the scripture. I'm memorizing this whole book. Let's do this together. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she literally did that like a couple of years ago. She was like, hey, you want to memorize Hebrews with me? And so that's why I'm memorizing Hebrews now, is because she's like, she put it in my head to do it. And so
that kind of highlights something you had mentioned about your dad a while ago to me, about whenever he would go somewhere and would take you along, he would throw you his little verse packet and have you quiz him on it. And just another great example of a faithful man who would not force it down your throat, but live life on life. Hey, I'm doing this. I'm memorizing all of these verses. Quiz me on it. I'm not asking you to do it, just, to memorize them yourself. But there was probably a lot of inspiration you got from that of like, great, I'm doing this with you, Dad.
Yeah.
We're bonding between that. So
yeah. I at the time didn't memorize those scriptures, but I knew that they existed. And now, like, it's amazing how even in your youth, as you get used to them and stuff, like God's still using that, even if you can't quote it verbatim. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And there's probably a lot of bonding that happens as you look back now that you're memorizing them. this many years forward, you're looking back on your childhood and go, oh, I remember when I did this one with Dad, or this one in this time in my life, or how God used this in this way. So that's awesome. So to your life trajectory now, you've graduated high school, you're staying local and going to Washington,
the University of Washington in Seattle.
And you're graduating as an accomplished genius, and you immediately get hired where?
Do you mean out of college?
Out of college.
So that was a struggle because I was trying to figure out what on earth am I going to do with my life after college. And I remember,
as most people do.
Yep, I remember vividly being on my knees crying out to God, like, where do I go? What do I do? And he said, he gave me like 4 different interview places. One was over in New Jersey with Honeywell. One was down in Florida with, it was like a concrete company.
Gator wrestling company.
No.
Oh.
One was down in Oregon with a paper company, and then the last one was the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, which I ended up going with.
Okay.
So there was in
kind of all over those.
Yeah, it was all over the place, and and I remember just not sure what I wanted to do, but I really wanted to go to Florida, honestly, because I wanted to get into the sunshine.
Well, you were born and raised in sunshine,
Yeah.
and now you're
Being in the Northwest was definitely hard with the weather, but again, God just used it to help me trust Him and thank Him for even the sunny days that I get.
So why did you end up staying in the Northwest instead of going to Florida?
Yeah, that was totally God, because I would have gone to Florida and I probably would not have followed God as well as I did, because even going down there for the interview, it was about work, but also about partying after work.
Yeah.
And so God shut the door, because it would have been hard for me to say no.
All things been equal, you would have picked it.
Right,
yeah.
because they actually said they wanted to offer me a job, but then all of a sudden their company got a hiring freeze.
Oh.
Like, weird.
Interesting, God.
Yes. So just how God works.
So you're at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard now. You're doing amazing things. You're their chief scientist in the bowels of the reactor.
No, it actually took me a couple years. It takes everybody a couple years to learn what they need us to learn to be the test engineers. We have all these qualifications we have to go through, and then like a couple 8-hour-long tests that we have to take, and then there's a board you have to sit to make sure that you can actually do it.
You're not just blowing up
Yep.
reactors.
Exactly. And then you go, like, I remember passing that board, and then it was like the following Monday, I was down in the thick of it on the aircraft carriers. I'm like, what did I get myself into?
18 decks down. Why are people glowing?
I wish people glowed. It'd make it more interesting.
Yeah, that's true. They're glowing on the inside.
Yeah.
It'll be, 20 years from now, you'll hear a commercial. If you or a loved one have been affected, are glowing in the night. If you no longer find yourself in need of night lights because your spouse is glowing. Yeah.
No.
Call 1-800. Okay. So you're doing these great things. You're still involved in a local church. Are you doing Navigators? Are you following in your footsteps of your parents there doing Navigators? Or is that just like who you are because of your culture? That's like, hey, I was raised a Navigator. Or are you just kind of doing your own thing? Or
Yeah, I was when I first moved over there, I just found another church to go to. And then there was actually 2 couples that came to the area, and they started a Navigator ministry. And so I got involved with them.
Cool.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that. That was probably one of the best times of growth and ministry. And I had a number of women in the house that God allowed me to buy that, so it was just a great time of like being able to pour into people, and other people's pouring into me.
And all of these are military women, so you're like the one constant clean person who has a normal job, and everyone else is like, I'll be gone for 9. Okay, see ya. But you've got this whole rotating house of women in Nav house. That
one was a wife of like a guy who was deployed, and there was a couple other civilians, but yeah, there were multiple military ladies.
Just an awesome a time for life on life, and this great community there. So okay.
just how God orchestrated all that. And of course, like looking back now, I'm like, oh God, you're so funny. Yeah, how you work.
How the tables have turned.
I know. Now, as I'm looking at ministering to other military women, it's like, yeah, here's the practice
Right.
he gave. And yeah, so, but I always thought that was cool, but my whole focus was very much on my job, right? And I knew God wanted me to be part of, the ministry with the Navigators, but I wasn't really discipling women that much or, going all in on that. Because I was just so focused. I had so much of my energies had to be poured out into the job because it was a demanding job of just putting out fires at work and trying to figure out how to test the reactors and not kill myself in the process.
Or the rest of us, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. But God was so merciful in all of that because there was a lot of feeling completely overwhelmed and having no idea what I was doing, but God would show me what to do. So little by little, made it through.
So you are there. That's where we meet. And, all the Navy people kind of, Navigator Navy people, center of gravity at your house, the Crompton Hospitality House. And now fast forward, I really want to get into, and we sort of laid the groundwork for this episode and gone a long ways into laying the groundwork for this, but I want to get into the impetus behind now what you're doing full time now and why the change, why the motivation, the why, the core value change, because it sounds like you're raised in this. You were born into this.
I was born into it.
You were then raised into it. You had all of these great examples of men and women around your life that were doing it. You've witnessed how it's done, so it's not even a question. You then are doing it alongside your normal job. Your flesh is like, yeah, I should be focusing on this, and your spirit's like, yeah, but this is what we're made for. Like we were born, And so you're even just doing it. Where was the trigger pull between all of that now to where you are now? And for the audience, what are you doing right now?
Yeah, so when we were part of the Navigator ministry, I still loved God and I wasn't trying to run away from him, but there definitely were things in my life that I did not give him 100% to, right? And so, it's only looking back now, as God opens my eyes to understand that, I was still holding back a lot. Yeah. And he allowed me to go through some really hard times and just a lot of grief and pain. My grandma passed away. My dad passed away all in 2019. And then I had a boyfriend that broke up with me. And then COVID, of course, hit. So much fun there. Yeah. And then, in that same year in 2020, I had a niece that died a month before she was supposed to be born. So just a lot of grief and a lot of pain. And then I was also struggling at that point, too, of just the job I was doing at the shipyard. Although I had amazing bosses and I enjoyed the people I worked with, I just felt like I needed something different. And I was trying to look for something different. And I just didn't know what to do. And so with all of that, God just allowed a time of just wrestling with him, of struggling with, okay, God, I've seen you all my life, but do I truly believe, are you really good? Do I truly believe that, you don't just set things up to pull the rug out from under people's lives, that you are working for good, even in these really hard times, And so I had to go through that wrestling and that struggle. And I remember just going and reading through Job and just crying out to God, because I felt a lot like what Job was saying, like, why did you even create me? Like, this is so pointless. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? There was a lot of depression and a lot of hurt that I had to go through. But I remember in Job chapter 40, verse 8, it says, would you condemn me to justify yourself? Right. Yeah. And God is saying that. And he that just spoke right to my heart, just knowing that's exactly what I was doing to God. I was saying, God, I know I'm right and you have screwed things up. And so I had to repent from that and just realize that that's, God is God. Like, he knows so much more than me, and me sitting here saying that this life sucks, right? It's really just not putting God in the place that he really is. And
Yeah.
so as I wrestled with all this and struggled, he mercifully helped me come out of all of that and allowed me to actually take a sabbatical from work, which was unheard of. Like that my bosses were like, yeah, you can take 3 months off. Like just absolutely unheard of. And they were very gracious and let me just take the time to really try to figure out, okay, what do I do? What do I want to do with my life? And as I did that, I went to a Navigator conference, and again, just how God leads, because there was nothing in my life at that point that was really Navigators. I mean, even my dad had passed away, and my mom had decided not to be part of Navigator, so there was nothing Navigators in my life at that point. And yet, this other couple who's starting a ministry over in the Bremerton area with the Navigators, the wife had forwarded me this invite to the conference that was clear on the East Coast. And I'm like, okay, sure, whatever.
My best friend's over there. I'll just use it as a trip.
That's basically what I ended up doing. I was like, well, I guess I could go see Karen. So I will go over there. And but that conference in July of 2021 was just exactly what I needed. I remember walking into it and feeling so like, why on earth am I here again? Because I wasn't connected with any of this. Like, I should just leave. And yet I stayed, and I remember through that, God just really asking me to come to him to learn about who he is. And so I just spent the next 3 weeks when I was over on the East Coast, just poring over the scriptures and just writing down attributes of God, and just really seeing how even in the midst of all hard circumstances, God is so merciful and so kind and so faithful to always fulfill what he says he's going to fulfill. And so that was just such a turning point in my heart. And I mean, so these 3 months of time away from my job, as I was struggling with what do I do next, they were really hard times, and my mom can contest to it. Like, there was a lot, and I think a lot of spiritual battle of just trying because I was still struggling with why am I where I'm at in life, right? And why have you allowed me to get to this point, God? And yet God, again, like looking back, it's like he was just mercifully just one step at a time pulling me through. Like,
if I show it all to you, you're going to be whatever.
Exactly.
So we need to do this baby steps.
Right. I was just reading in Exodus how like he did not take the Israelites the short way. He took them the long way because he knew they would freak out if he took them the short way through like the harder territories of people that could fight them.
You don't pick that up unless you look at a map and you're like, wait, they went where?
Yeah.
And there's a shorter path here.
Right.
But they had to go through, like you're saying, they had to kind of do it themselves with God to realize his faithfulness, even though it's been there.
Right. Because and that's what God has shown me over and over is that he would not be good if he just took us on the short path and didn't realize the true need in our life is him, right? And so there's
a parenting lesson in there somewhere.
In there, yes.
A marriage lesson. There's all sorts of lessons.
Absolutely. It's applicable to so many parts of our life.
Yeah. Stay tuned for episode 2. Back with Joanne.
Oh, it's so true. And from those times, those precious times of pouring into God's word and just praying, God opened up a lot of just amazing things of who he was, and just me being able to claim or realize a lot of the lies. Like, I had this mental image in my mind that God was allowing all these people to just go on cruise ships and get on with their lives, and they were having so much fun getting married and having kids, and I'm here just stuck in this like dinghy, and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And yet he flipped it around and helped me realize that he is with me in that dinghy, and that's all that matters, right? And that verse, Psalm 84:10, that says, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. That just struck home. Like, that's what's important, is I get to be with my God, and it doesn't really matter where I am, but that he is taking the time to personally train me was like, whoa, God, okay, you care. So that really spoke to my heart and changed. I still remember vividly the time over in the East Coast when that struck my heart and helped me realize how he really loved me.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to highlight that because we kind of just glossed right over that, but there's the practical lesson here is that you took time to be with God.
Yeah.
You stopped working, literally. Now, mercifully, they kept paying you.
Actually, I was living on savings at that point.
There you go.
There
Even
you go.
better. So you took time to write white space into your life, to allow margin in your life for the Lord to work, instead of the traditional American way of saying, okay, Lord, it looks like I've got Tuesday evening free this week. Can you speak to me then? Otherwise, we'll reconnect again next Thursday, right? Like that's the traditional way. Like, oh, I'm so busy. I've got all this going on, but I really need change. I really need fulfillment. I really need you to speak to me, Lord. So maybe let's plan on meeting Sunday morning when it's worship, and that's when we're supposed to be doing it. But no, there's this real practical truth that we see through Scripture. This isn't just a one-off of like, I think I'll just take time off, and that's the cool thing to do. No, there's scriptural precedence for people breaking away from the chaos, going to find God alone, and then him answering in that moment. And not that he's not there with you the whole time. I mean, look at what we just talked about your whole life. You're born into this. You were raised all around it. You're given the opportunity to practice it now in your own home in Bremerton. He's there all of those times, but our attention span is so goldfishy that we're not realizing it until you take the time to really focus on him and really turn your heart to him and make that a priority, and then he allows this to happen. And so what was the culmination of that?
Yeah. So again, I was blown away by God's love. And so I knew that God was asking me more and more to come to him more and more, and to find out how to pour into others, really. And so I went to the Navigator camp here at the Whidbey here out in Whidbey, and was blown away, because that was the first time in a long time that there's been actually a good community of people just encouraging me and not being like, what is wrong with you? Why are you taking time away? Like, you should be working, so all these lies that Satan had, like, there was a community of people that poured into me and just said, wow, that's awesome. I think that's awesome that you're trusting God, that you're seeking God.
Yeah.
And that in that time, I knew that I needed to go seek out community. And I didn't know where. And so I had basically two options. I was looking out at here at Whidbey to see if God wanted me to move out here, or if I should actually go to the East Coast where my best friend is. And because there was a couple that was starting a Navigator group out there too, near the DC area.
Yeah.
So I went out there for a couple days and was praying about, what do I do, God? And just for a number of reasons, God, two of them was, one, God really impressed upon me that I had been so burnt out from work that I was really not in a place to just start ministry right away. Not that I knew that that's where I was going, but I knew that if I went out there, that's basically what I would be doing, is just jumping in to like the front line, and I just wasn't ready for that. And secondly, I just had a real strong passion that I wanted to look at what my dad had written, all the journals and diaries that he'd written over the years about his life.
Yeah.
And because before he passed away, he kind of passed those on to me. And ultimately, I'm still praying about making a book about it, but that's definitely going to have to be God, because it's kind of gotten on the back burner. But just I think even just reading through his diaries really helped me just have an idea of what he did with the ministry, and how much he trusted God and did so many things in the background that I had no idea. I remember reading this random story of him just, I had bought this bed at a garage sale, but it needed screws, and so he just went and got the screws, and like, I never knew that he needed to go do that for me, but he did, and so that I would have a bed to sleep in, and that is so the image of God, right? Of how behind the scenes we don't even realize how much God is doing for us.
You're concerned with what the bed looks like, and is it comfortable?
Right.
And he's like, hey, I just did this for you.
Yeah, I put it together, and like, if it weren't for him, you wouldn't have a place to sleep.
Right.
So just things like that just really spoke to me, and just how my dad was a man of the word, of just he would pray and he would read the word, and he, just trusted God, even in the time that he was sick for over a year, like on his bed sick, like, but he knew that God was who he said he was. And so that really helped me
And now
too.
he knows that God is who he says he is.
Yeah, in his presence now. It's
We're
really
not
neat.
jealous. Whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So you decided to then pursue ministry here on Whidbey instead of the East Coast. And that
Well,
was...
even then, I didn't know I was going to go into ministry. I just
Okay,
knew I
okay.
needed community.
Yeah.
And so when your parents were like, because I texted them, I was like, hey, would you know of anywhere that I could stay? Or, if I did come up to Whidbey, and they're like, stay with us.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. So I didn't know what I was going to get myself into staying with your parents. But it was, God just so blessed it. It was so fun to be able to live with them. And,
Cool.
to be kind of part of your family.
Well, you are part of our family now. Adopted. Yeah.
Adopted sister.
We're all children of God, so we're technically brother and sister.
It's
It
true.
works. Yeah.
It's true.
So,
Yeah. Well, it was just such a gift from God to be part of that. And then with that, as I met with your mom, and as I was part of this community, just over and over, God just was convicting me of, like, you have been given so much, so I want you to pour out to others.
Yeah.
And so, and I remember reading, well, as I was struggling with, what do I do next? What do I do next? God asked me to just, again, take time to just thank him, right?
Yeah.
I think often we come to him so much, like you were saying, like, okay, on Tuesday night, you tell me what to do. Okay, good. As opposed to, God, how about I just come and spend time with you and just love you for who you are, and just adore you, thank you, instead of just being like, what do I do? What do I do? Because that just honors him so much, that we're just in his presence.
Right.
In Psalm 131, it talks about like a child who's, with the parent, he's weaned, right? He's not like trying to, he's not like hungry. He's like, no, I know my food will be coming whenever. So
Right.
just having that mentality of, I'm going to trust God for the next step, and just enjoy his presence. And so that's what I did. I was writing down all the attributes of God and just thanking him for it. And in that, I remember that he is my friend. And so I went to John 15:15, because God led me to that verse about, no longer do I call you servants, but I call you friends. And then the verse right after that says, and, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. And the Holy Spirit just arrow to the heart. And I was like, no, I don't like it. Because I still was like, I can't do this ministry thing. This is so weird.
Think of all the logistics involved.
Well, and I really didn't want to fundraise.
Yeah. Who does?
It's a lot. And so, but I knew I needed to write it down. So I wrote it in my journal. I was like, and then about a month later, I was talking with Janet Human, and I just was like, I got to go all in. So that's when I decided that, I'm going to join the Navigators, and going to do what I need to do to trust God with the money. And he has blown me away at how he's brought people around like yourself, and who's just advocated for me and encouraged me. And like, even in this last conference that I just came back from over in Maryland, like, there were so many people that were just like, you're doing what God wants you to do. It's like, wow, oh my gosh. Okay. So that's been so encouraging to see how God has just shown me that, I'm on the right path. Trust him.
There's an affirming there that happens not only financially. I mean, that's a big affirming, like, oh, I guess I am doing the right thing, but also in your soul. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of rest and peace after the chaos and after the stress and anxiety of, like, am I going to eat? there's the rest and peace of, like, okay, the Lord has chosen me for this. Like you said, he appointed you for this. You were born into this, and here you are, fulfilling that. And not that the Navigator ministry has to be that. They're just another financial and tool vehicle for the gospel message, but that is so much part of your history and blood already. I mean, what a cool culmination of how the Lord has
Yeah.
brought that around. So what would you say was your why? I mean, like you're in this great job, you're doing that. Why were you struggling? Why were you looking for something greater than what you had? What was that draw? Was it your dad getting sick? Was it this non-contentment in where you were? Was it this, I mean, you had that house full of awesome people and they were coming and going in your life, but there's obviously something more in your mind that you're like, there's got to be more to this. There's got to be, Lord, where are you? How do I find this? So what were the sort of the starts of those questions or the why behind that?
Yeah. It definitely was, one, my job was getting to a place that was just not as fulfilling. Like he had, for about 5 years, I worked up in the office, and I was helping the management and stuff, trying to figure out attrition rates and hiring rates and stuff. And initially it was great because I like
You're not
learned
18 decks down in the
Yeah.
bowels of the ship.
True. And it was all day shift, which is amazing. And I was able to set up a pretty good system of like trying to figure out what we want to do. And so my bosses were very grateful for, what I did. But then it got to a point where it was just like, okay, I feel like I've done all I can with this position and I'm ready to move on. It was just more like data crunching every month at that point. And I just, there was no new like project to work on. And so that was part of it, is like I knew that I'd kind of finished with that.
So it was a general discontentment with where you were anyway. You're already now going to look for the next career, but then to shift that into saying, well, maybe not, maybe full-time missions.
Yeah.
That's a big difference.
There was a huge difference, right? Because I was looking around at the shipyard because there's so many other options around the shipyard, but nothing really was like, oh, that's so interesting. And I've known that I really do enjoy talking about the scriptures and talking about what God is doing.
Yeah.
It's
How do I
just,
do that more?
yeah. But I never really thought, oh, well, then go into ministry. I don't know why that didn't click, but
thinking about it now, it's like, wait a second. You love talking about scripture. You love talking about how Jesus has worked in your life.
Yeah.
Ministry, nah, that can't be it.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it too is just the fears, right? Because there's a lot of fear of conflict. Like I don't enjoy conflict, and I know talking about Jesus is going to bring conflict because he was persecuted, so I fully expect to be persecuted. So and just the idea of people do look at you like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing what you're doing? So just trying to remember that it's all for Jesus and that doesn't matter what other people think. But I'm so grateful that God has led me, but it has been a huge process. It was not overnight that God like flipped the switch.
It's still a process.
Oh,
it's
absolutely. Yeah.
Just came back from that conference and that was good.
That conference was amazing. Good. And like God answered every single prayer I could have asked, like from the sunshine to safe travels to, everybody getting on the plane.
Yeah.
So it just was amazing. And then again, how many people were just so encouraging to me. Like multiple guys in the military came up to me and were just like, "What, we need more women that will reach out to the women in the military because they're seeing their friends in the military struggling, and they don't have other women that they can pass them off to, right? And it's this hard tension of like, I want you to grow, but like." It's
I can't do that.
Right. It makes it awkward. So it's amazing how God has led me, and I'm just excited to see.
That's a good segue into what are you doing now with this mission? I mean, how are you manifesting that here on Whidbey?
Yeah, I'm first of all just praying, that God would lead me, because I don't want to run ahead of him, but I know he's got good works for me. So I know that there's women out there that are interested in growing and want to grow. And so just that God would lead me to those women that I can encourage, support, pray for, walk with throughout whatever they're going through, and help them have the tools that they need to continue to grow themselves. Right. especially before they head out on deployments or head overseas or wherever they're going.
Yeah.
Because, the time here on Whidbey is short, and whatever I can do to help them be stronger so that, when they're away from this community that's so strong, that they will soar instead of flounder.
Yeah. So what do you feel like the vision the Lord has called you to is for you specifically?
So a lot of it's one-on-one. I
Okay.
love meeting with women one-on-one, right? Just to really see their hearts, to really get to know them personally,
Yeah.
and to try to tailor whatever they're going through to help them see that whatever they're going through, God has the answer in His Word, right?
Yeah.
And how can they themselves do that, without me? But I would just be the
Yeah.
conduit of helping them initially,
Yeah.
But also, just praying about, putting together, women's breakfasts and things that bring women together and encourage one another to grow. And I don't know fully what it's going to look like.
It's still developing.
Yep, it's absolutely still developing, and I think it'll be a continuing process. And I want it to be, because it's as soon as I start thinking, oh, this is exactly what I'm doing, I feel like I miss the fact that I need to be continuing to abide in Christ and to trust Him with where we go with it.
Yeah.
Because I can easily be like, well, this is exactly what we're doing. And He's like, I don't think so.
Well, it keeps you curious, right? And then in turn keeps you engaged and interested in that growth and not so routine or fully satisfied that you're like, okay, this is boring and I've got this, Lord, I don't need you anymore. It's my agenda. But still fully satisfied in Him, in the trust that He does have the next day planned out for you, or the next event, or the next group. So, and that's a lot of work. I mean, like I'm just imagining especially one-on-one, it's not just let's go have coffee. That seems like everybody's dream life, right? Like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and go have coffee for the rest of my life with people. Like, great. Thanks, extrovert. But at the same time, I mean, there's an emotional cost here that you are bearing the burdens of these women and then not so readily giving them an answer that they may want to hear, or that the world would say is, oh, here's your practical next step. I mean, you have the difficult job of, as you mentioned, pointing them to Christ and showing them that He is that answer, which means you have to know that, which means you have to, and you have so much experience from that, which you can relate to and say, well, this is how He, has done this in my life. And so the Lord has just, provided so many opportunities for relating to these women. But what would you say is one thing that our listeners can be praying for you on that will stand the test of time? I mean, obviously you've got your day-to-day needs, the financial needs as you go around pouring into other women all over Whidbey Island and beyond. But from a spiritual standpoint, guarding you from spiritual attacks, and allowing you to trust the Lord, what would be some things that you would ask for? Continued prayer and supplication.
Yeah, definitely. For my own heart to just be continuing to seek Jesus first, right? And there is a lot of discouragement and hardship, and I know it will come because everybody gets to decide, right? And I can find the women and think, oh, these are the women that are going to go on, and then they can choose, no, I'm going to just turn away from God, right?
Yeah.
So just knowing that happens, like that I would be encouraged in Christ and not in, oh, I have these many women that I'm meeting with or whatnot, but that it's about His story and whatever God wants. And so that people can just be praying that my heart would be just so in tune with Christ. I think of how Jesus was like, whatever, what I do, the Father does, right? Like, that's what I want my heart to be like, what I'm doing is what Jesus does, right?
Yeah,
and so if you're, but that takes a lot of prayer and support and a lot of just, remembering that I cannot do this on my own. It has to be God. It has to be His ministry. It's not me. I was watching that devotion movie on the flight back.
Oh yeah, that's a good movie.
And there was this scene where the the Marines were like, down with all the fire was coming at them.
In the Chosen Reservoir.
And like the planes came and like were able to to knock out all the enemies, and just God just spoke to me in that scene of just like, that's what people are doing when they pray, is they're the angels, the flights that are coming in and giving the reprieve of those Marines in the ditch, right? Of like, there's hope, there's something else out there, So I cherish prayers because I know that God uses that to uphold people.
You
you
get
know,
to get a big breath.
exactly.
Thank you, Lord.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, we can make it through.
Coming from an industry and a life where it's so built around the respect of what you do or how many things you've done, or building your fit rep or eval or your job description on and promotion boards on, I saved 365 million man hours, that's whatever, like, to now not make it about the numbers, like you said, like I'm discipling 13 girls or I'm discipling whatever, like, and really be able to focus on where the Lord is showing you the heart of that one woman that's going to carry this on, or the one woman that's going to lead these others or whatever, and to be able to focus on that. I mean, what a neat testimony you have to see that in your dad's writings as he portrayed that through his life. And my own dad had mentioned how our family had that connection with the Cromptons and over in Africa, and apparently his uncle was over there at the time or something like that. I'm getting the stories mixed up, but there's your dad had touched the Miller side somehow years back when my dad was at the academy, and they knew people that went over there. And I'm like, the world
your
is
dad
so
started
small.
Yeah, your dad started actually giving to a couple that worked with my parents over in Ghana. Yeah.
And that's back in the 80s.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
now you're living here and working here on the island and doing like, Lord, are you there? Is this you?
He is so
what a cool, to be able to, look back at these Ebenezers, these stones in our life that we pile together and say, look, Lord, that's where you were faithful. Look at that time. Oh, that's where you were faithful. Oh, that too? Like that, you did that? Like, that's got to be an encouraging part, and probably that one of the things that carries you on when the devil can come in and say, or other people can come in and say, you should be focused on these numbers, even in ministry, right?
Yep,
how many times
exactly.
in ministry we're focused on, well, have you reached your cap of how much money you should have this month? And have you reached this goal and this thing? And those are great, but they're all manipulations of men to kind of attempt to bring about this gospel message, as opposed to just trusting in the Lord that he's got this. And that sounds terrifying. But kudos to you for leading us along in your exceptional faithfulness to the Lord, so that we can live on the fringes of this and soak in the glory of God as we witness you forward in this, which is why I'm having you here on this podcast, because it's encouraging. It's selfish, but it's encouraging me, my heart, and it always does to encourage. And I know everyone else listening is going to be encouraged as well, because those are the heroes of the faith, right? Seeing like, it can be done, because we have the same fears, right? That we don't share or communicate, and we say, how does the Lord want me to deal with this? Do I go to the left or the right? How do I trust him in this? And we come up with all sorts of excuses. Well, I've got a wife and kids that I need to care for. I've got this great degree that I just spent 4 years working on. I can't just give that up. Or I've got this these responsibilities, and yet to be able to say no. I'm doing it, and
God will take
the Lord is
one step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Believe me, I've had all those fears.
Yeah. So
I need this and this and this. Like, I got you, girl. I got you.
You don't need this, but you do need this, and this more in abundance, and I got you on this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
let's wrap this up by sharing with everyone, if you will. You're writing this book, or you had started writing this book. Your dad.
Yes, that's something you can be praying for.
And the faithfulness of your own father in both the awesome times, but also just the life of mundane, and as a father and husband. who is struggling with the same sort of things of like, I need to provide for my family, but also I know that this is where the Lord has called me. And so he blessed you, your dad blessed you with this before he passed. And here's my story. Now, it's easy for those of us on the outside to say, he blessed you with this so that you can share it with the rest of us. But also, as you mentioned already, he obviously gave this to you, and look at what you're doing now. And there's a point where we have to look back and say, Lord, did you give him this to Joanne so that she can be encouraged now as she's going forward in the same life and the same trust and the same ministry? So are you still planning on writing a book about your dad and the Navigators and all that? And if so, how's that coming? And if not, what are you going to do? What is the plan with that?
Yeah, I honestly need to pray more about it, because I mean, I really would like to. It's just, it's hard. And there's a lot in there that, I mean, I have a great outline that I've created of the stories that I'd like to put together. But it's going to take a lot of work to put it all together.
Yeah.
And so just trying to figure out, God, is that where you want me to spend my time and energy? And if so, help me take that time, set that aside as needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a lot more prayer of just the wisdom of, again, like trying to figure out my time and how to use it for God in whatever facet he has for me, because he's now my boss. So I have to check in with him a lot more.
That is a good way to put it. Yes. He's the one that writes your fit reps and your promotion boards and who you have to take your marching orders from every day.
And honestly, I'm feeling at peace of just letting it sit for a little while.
Yeah,
and so,
marinate.
Right. And even as I'm doing that, I'm listening and reading other books, and I'm getting more like, oh, this is a cool way of writing this. So
right,
I'm like,
yeah, you don't want to just jump into it and just to publish something.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So I don't know what God is doing. I mean, I think there's a lot there that people would be so encouraged. I mean, like I was encouraged reading through it. So I think there's a lot that I could pass on to others that would be so encouraging, but it's all God. Like it has to be God. Like there's, they talk about fears and like, oh, there's no way I can do it by myself, but God will make a way if that's what he wants. So,
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it has been a joy having you on the air this morning with us, and I'm excited to have you on the air next time. This has been a very serious, very like down to earth episode on how the Lord has worked and really just giving encouragement to those listening on that it's possible and you can do it, and that it doesn't take special. You're faithful. You're answering his call, and that's what it's about. And I'm so blessed to be able to have walked through this and getting to hear you share all of that. And I'm looking forward to the next one where we get to talk all about the fun side of
Nice.
what it looks like to not have a 9-to-5 agenda. So
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Anna Vivo podcast. We welcome your feedback and ideas. You can learn more about us by simply Googling the word Anna Vivo. This podcast is supported by listeners like you. I am a licensed real estate broker with Compass Real Estate and a nationwide real estate matchmaker. We consult with you for free, find and vet the right real estate professional that specializes in the area and niche you need, are paid by that professional, and they get clients like yourself who want and need their unique specialty or winning track record. If you or someone you know is in the market to buy or sell real estate anywhere in the U.S., don't simply web search the highest paying advertiser. Let us use our licensed experience to find and vet the real and best professional for you. It costs you nothing but a phone call or email with me, and has saved my clients financially and emotionally. I'd be honored to serve, and you can reach me direct by email at tim.c.miller@outlook.com. And as always, to God be the glory.